in this part of the course, we're going to go over a couple of different analytical techniques. So you're going to become familiar in how to use these techniques and how to use them to extract information that is useful to you as a student of pharmacy. Now, in this part, we're going to go over why spectroscopic analysis is needed. Now, spectroscopy is specifically techniques that involve the use of light to tell you something about a sample, be it a specific molecule or a mixture of molecules. We're going to go over some of the general concepts that underpin spectroscopic techniques, and then we're going to focus on two techniques in particular. The first is UV spectroscopy, and the second is infrared spectroscopy. Now, in this part of the course, we'll be looking at a combination of theory and worked examples, and there'll be examples that we work through so you can see how things like calculations are performed, for example, and then you'll be given some questions for you to have a go at in your own time, and you can use these to check your understanding. We will also have a workshop where you'll have a chance to try out some of these questions in a small group setting, and we'll be able to go through the answers to these questions, and I'll be able to answer any questions that you may have. Now, the recommended course book for this part of the course is Pharmaceutical Analysis by Watson and Livingstone, and you'll be able to get this from the library. And there are sections in this book that cover both infrared analysis and UV visible spectroscopy as well. So just to start with, I'm just going to very briefly show you some areas where spectroscopy is used within the pharmaceutical industry, because it really is used in quite a wide range of different areas. So spectroscopy is used to understand different diseases, different disease states and different conditions, and it's used to identify and analyse key targets that could be present, so key drug targets. You can use it to analyse DNA and RNA and use it to look at things like proteins and enzymes as well. You can also use it to look at how well drug molecules can bind to their intended target. So there really is a very diverse range of usages in understanding diseases and conditions. Now, it's used extensively in the drug discovery and drug development process, so it's used certainly to validate that molecules that have been produced during organic synthesis are correct. It's used to help identify lead compounds for further analysis, and it's used in the testing of these compounds against their drug targets as well. Now, as I've already said, it's used in drug discovery. It's also used in development, so looking at things like how to scale up reactions. So this could be scaling up from a few milligrams that you might make in a research laboratory up to kilos or ton scale reactions that you need to produce pharmaceuticals that are used on a wide scale with patients. We could use spectroscopy to look at things like stability and solubility of proposed formulations, and to test our formulations to check that they are appropriate as well. And it's also used, as I've already mentioned, during drug production. So this is where we have the extensive scale up of the production of medications in order to make these available for widespread use. But it can also be used to verify the quality of feedstock compounds. So these are compounds that we put into our reactions. These are our starting materials that are then used to produce our active ingredients. And it's also used to ensure product quality, and because it's very amenable to this, it can be used in a production pipeline. So you can essentially flow reaction mixtures over a spectroscopic analysis technique to tell you something about that production process and whether it's proceeding correctly or not. So you can look for changes in your production pipeline. And because of the way spectroscopy works, it makes it very easy to incorporate this into automated equipment. Now, solving the structure of an unknown compound is not possible using a single analytical technique on its own. So if you are given, for example, a white powder and you're told to identify what is in this, you can't use a single technique to tell you everything about that powder. Now, chemical analysis involves fitting pieces of data together to build up a complete picture, to solve the structure of what you are dealing with. Now, you could need information such as what functional groups are present in the molecules within your unknown powder. You may need to know how much of the powder you have, or what concentration of a compound you have in solution, or you may need to know how the atoms in the powder, in the molecules within the powder, connect together to identify this unknown molecule. Now, this is something that you'll learn over the next 2 years. So this year we'll be looking at infrared analysis and UV analysis, and next year you'll move on to cover nuclear magnetic resonance, or NMR, and mass spec as well. But it's important to understand that all of these techniques give different information that fits together. And so no one technique in isolation can tell you everything that you would need to know about an unknown compound. And that's why you need to learn about different analytical techniques that complement each other. Now, over the next few weeks, we will look at the following techniques. So we'll look at UV visible spectroscopy. Now, this is a technique that uses ultraviolet and visible light to allow us to quantify how much of something is present within a sample. We'll also be looking at infrared spectroscopy. Now, this uses infrared light, and what it tells us is what functional groups are present in molecules within a sample. So it can't tell us how much of something is present, but it can tell us which functional groups the molecule has. Now, we'll also be looking at another technique called thin layer chromatography. This is a separation technique, so it allows us to separate mixtures of molecules. And we can do this in the lab. It doesn't use any specific equipment other than a UV light, and it lets you see how many components are present within a particular sample. Now, all three of these techniques rely on exposing a sample to light and seeing how much of that light is absorbed. So for UV visible spectroscopy and infrared spectroscopy, we will quantify how much light is absorbed. For thin layer chromatography, you will see with your eyes how much light is absorbed, and this will tell you how many different components there are within a particular sample. Now, each technique tells you something different about your sample. So all three of these techniques are complementary, and you'll see how the information from these techniques fits together, and so they can be used to help enhance each other and enhance the information that you get about a particular sample.